The name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. We begin today's session, and we welcome you to today's session with Sheikh Al-Habib on Sheikh Al-Habib's TV series. Apologies. The title is when the so-called Sunni scholars inadvertently prove that Imam Ali is the true authority and successor. I seek the protection of Allah, the all-hearing, the all-knowing, from the rejected shaitan. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. In all things I say, I am faithful to Muhammad and his pure family, in what they have concealed, in what they have made known, in what has reached me of them, and in that which has not. Praise be Allah, the Lord of the world. And may the blessings and peace, praise of Allah be upon the Master of all creation, our Master, Muhammad, and his pure progeny.
ولعنة الله على قتلتهم وأعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين آمين. نصحنا غير مرة
We have advised our opposers more than once, also those who watch us, to not let themselves be led astray and misled by the preachers of their sect, those who call themselves the men of their faith, and to not think well of them and trust them blindly, especially when it comes to the concept of narrations and whether those narrations are weak or strong, accepted or not. Because we have seen there are many times, numerous occasions, that the opposers, scholars, would reject or weaken a narration, or even their followers weaken a narration, and their excuse is so and so said that, because they are experts of jarh and ta'dil, or the science of narration and the chain of transmission in Islam. For example, they would refute a point or something because they say certain scholar had said that this chain of transmission or this narrator is weak. And then this poor opposer, so-called Sunni, intellectually poor, they think that those statements by the scholars are actually true, and that's the end of it. Certain expert of the field of the science of narration would say this narration is rejected or weak because in its chain transmission there is a certain individual that is or an individual whose narrations are rejected and cannot be relied upon, and they think that concludes the matter. But pay attention, dear Muslim. If you listen to those words as they are, and to not scrutinize them and submit to these so-called scholars without investigating what's behind, or read between the lines, then this is blind following. This so-called scholar that you've asked this on this day, and the person he follows, that follows the so-called experts of narration, they are simply following each other. That is all there is. It's someone's opinion or view. It could be that that scholar is wrong. It could be that he said what he said due to his bias, or even out of sectarianism and loathing and hate for the other. So investigate the reason why a narration or a single narrator is considered weak and unreliable, rather than accept what you are told without question. Do not let others think on your behalf. especially those who claim to be experts. Evaluate, investigate things on your own to understand better why these narrations are declared the way they are, and why their narrators are seen as they were or defined as they were. Did those narrators commit major sins? Was he caught lying and certain narrations or not? Yes, some were caught fabricating or inserting narrations. So yes, they can be scrutinized and rejected. But you might see a massive number of narrators. They weren't caught committing a crime or a sin or anything that would make their or put their reliability and trustworthiness into question. The reason they were aspersed is because they didn't like what they narrated, even if they were trustworthy originally. The narration that they narrated is not something they accept. For example, it could be a narration that benefits the Rafida or the Shia. So straight away, they declare that individual to narrate things that are weak or rejected, and they would not take narrations from him. This is not fairness. That your standard is whatever agrees with your inclinations, and what you reject those that don't. Fairness is you have a single standard for everything. A trustworthy person, narration is accepted. A not trustworthy person's narration is not accepted. But to take a narration and act upon it, that's a different field entirely. So this is an important thing to pay attention to, that there are many occasions in which their so-called experts make declarations or conclusions about some narrators due to their own sectarian bias, not due to academic or scientific standards. And in this session, if Allah supports us, we will show, let's say that how we could call it a practice session or a training session that can help you find the methods, the means, or the steps to find reasons behind why some narrations are rejected and others aren't. A man considered one of the masters, the major masters of Al-Bukhari, those who narrated of Al-Bukhari. So it must be then established that this man is trustworthy, and that's the case. Their major scholars have declared him as trustworthy, like Abi Hatim, Ibn Hajar, Al-Dhahabi, and even Ibn Sa'd. However, on the other hand, there are those who declared him weak and untrustworthy, and they said a lot about him. But why? The secret is in what Ibn Qutaybah had said in Al-Ma'arif, the book of Al-Ma'arif, page 289. He said he was practicing Shi'ism or involved in Shi'ism and narrated rejected things. So many people did not take anything from him or declared him as weak. So was he reliable or not originally? One of the masters of Al-Bukhari, one of those who narrated many or reported many narrations, and the scholars declared him as trustworthy. But when they found that he had some Shi'ism, and the way they describe Shi'ism, the way they define it, is not the way we see it. Shi'ism to them is simply to narrate things about the traits or the noble deeds of Ahlul Bayt, peace be upon them. The most they could ever say is that Ali is better than Uthman. not disown Uthman, let alone those who came before Uthman, Abu Bakr and Umar, may Allah's damnations be upon them. This is what they mean when they say Shi'ism, or accuse some of their scholars or individuals as being a Shi'i. They see these narrations to benefit the real Shia, the Rafida, and they reject these narrations, of course, and in that process they declare him as weak and untrustworthy. This man is called Ubaydullah ibn Musa al-Absi. You see in al-Bukhari, it says Ubaydullah ibn Musa narrated to us. Ubaydullah ibn Musa narrated to us. Several narrations, you see Bukhari narrating of him. One of his narrations that, of course, our opposers didn't like, what Ibn al-Maghazi reported in al-Manaqib, number 67, his chain of transmission, he said, Ubaydullah ibn Musa said to us, Matar ibn Abi Matar said to us, by Anas, who said, now notice this narration that I don't think many of you have heard of. This is from the sources of our opposers. By Anas, who said, I was with the Prophet, praise upon him and his household. When he saw Ali coming towards him, and then he said, this man and myself are an authority upon my nation on the day of resurrection. So Ali is the authority of Allah on his creation or upon his creation, as Muhammad is an authority of Allah upon his creation. And those two authorities are authorities on the day of resurrection, an authority upon all creation, even there. This is the narration of Ubaydullah ibn Musa. So of course, they wouldn't see it right to accept it. So they say this is a rejected narration. Bukhari, for example, didn't report this narration, despite his Sheikh being the one who narrated this thing. They remove or omit these narrations and only include the ones that go along with their own inclinations and their own bias. So, because of this variety of narration that this narrator specifically reported, he was aspersed. Among them is Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the Imam of the Hanbali sect. In Tarikh al-Islam by Al-Dhahabi, volume 5, page 389, it is said, Abu al-Hasan al-Maymuni said, was mentioned the presence of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Ubaydullah ibn Musa was mentioned in the presence of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. But then I noticed signs on him that he seems to not approve of this person when he was mentioned in his presence. Then he said, this man did mix-ups, meaning he narrated narrations that are bad and revealed those calamities or reported those calamities, and he saw fit to narrate them, such as one of the narrations we just mentioned, when the Prophet, praise upon him and his household, said, me and this man are authorities of Allah upon the creation in the day of resurrection. Ahmad ibn Hanbal, of course, sees this as a calamity. Also, questions and answers of Abi Dawood for Ahmad, Abu Dawood al-Sijistani, or Sistani asked his master Ahmad ibn Hanbal some questions, and he included his answers in a number of books. Volume 3, page 150. Of course, the questions are by Al-Ajuri, who's asking Abu Dawood, and then Abu Dawood, naturally, and relays what Ahmad ibn Hanbal had answered him, or answered to these questions. On this page, we see the following. Abu Dawood said, I heard Ahmad ibn Hanbal say, who is Ubaydullah ibn Musa? Every disaster comes from Ubaydullah ibn Musa. And this is an example of very stern condemnation, aspersion by Ahmad ibn Hanbal, that this person was responsible for disasters. So, but why? What was Ahmad's issue with this man? We find the answer to this question in Siyar A'lam al-Nubala by Al-Dhahabi, volume 9, page 553, states Ahmad ibn Zuhair, 573, Ahmad ibn Zuhair says, I heard Yahya ibn Ma'in. Who is Yahya ibn Ma'in? The Imam of Jarh and Ta'dil, who is not lesser than Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the opposer's field of hadith. When he was asked, or it was said to him, Ahmad ibn Hanbal said about Ubaydullah ibn Musa because he was accused of Shi'ism, or for the reason of Shi'ism. That is the problem. That's why Ahmad ibn Hanbal criticized him in such a manner and rejected him. So the secret is revealed now. What did Yahya ibn Ma'in do or say? It's surprising actually, because he exposes Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And this is the scandal here that is revealed to all. Yahya responded, said, by Allah the Great, I heard Abdul Razzaq about this matter more than what Ubaydullah ibn Musa says. But Ahmad ibn Hanbal was afraid that his path leads to Abdul Razzaq, or as he said. Ahmad ibn Zuhair comments about this. He says, two trustworthy people narrated this of Yahya ibn Ma'in. Well, let's describe what was said. Yahya ibn Ma'in is sitting down, and he hears Ahmad ibn Hanbal criticized, scrutinized, aspersed Ubaydullah ibn Musa because of so-called Shi'ism that he was accused of. But how did Yahya ibn Ma'in respond to that? He swore by Allah. He said, by Allah the Great, I heard things from Abdul Razzaq as-San'ani, the master of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and Yahya ibn Ma'in. So he was their teacher. He swears, Yahya ibn Ma'in, saying, by Allah, I heard our master, our teacher, the teacher of Ahmad, about this matter of the narrations regarding or that benefit Shi'ism narrations, the matter of Shi'ism. I heard more of Abdul Razzaq than I heard Ubaydullah ibn Musa say. So why did Ahmad ibn Hanbal raise his voice against Ubaydullah ibn Musa? Because of so-called Shi'ism and what he narrated that benefits Shi'ism. But he did not make any criticism of Abdul Razzaq, despite Abdul Razzaq narrating even more narrations in that regard. the concept of Shiism, or in service of Shiism. Yahya ibn Ma'in defines the cheap reason why Ahmad ibn Hanbal did that, because Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he see him as a businessman who trades with narrations, and that's his bread and butter. But Ahmad ibn Hanbal saying that Ahmad ibn Hanbal was worried that Ahmad ibn Hanbal, because Ahmad ibn Hanbal, when he went to Abdul Razzaq, he wanted to gather as much narrations from the teachings of As-San'ani as possible to trade them later on, to use them as commodities to live off. Here is Abdul Razzaq, what he narrates. Here is the narrations about Shi'ism, and also narrations that expose Abu Bakr and Umar, Uthman, and others, even Muawiyah and those similar to Muawiyah. He hears all of these narrations by Abdul Razzaq, but he doesn't asperse the Sheikh. Why? Because if he did say to people, Abdul Razzaq is just like Abdullah ibn Musa, who he didn't take narrations from, only a few, because he in his eyes he's a Shia or criticism, then his reliability will be questioned in the eyes of people. All the effort he did and all the time he spent to Abdul Razzaq will mean nothing. Then he'll have nothing to give to people. How is he going to make himself an authority upon people? He won't be able to narrate anything from Abdul Razzaq, or very few, because he aspersed him. Despite hearing so many things that require condemnation, as Yahya ibn Ma'in admitted, who was one of the students who was taught by Abdul Razzaq alongside Ahmad ibn Hanbal. But the reason was cheap. He said Ahmad ibn Hanbal worried simply about not having anything then to sell. And that's all it was. This is the image of Ahmad ibn Hanbal that people were deceived by. They think he is virtuous, sincere, force of good, that has no fear of anything except Allah, works for the sake of Sunnah and walks the path of the so-called Sunnah as they see it. But the truth is, he looks out for himself, for his own benefit and his own image. He does not want to condemn or criticize his master that taught him everything he knows and everything he relates to people. Because if he did, then he'll have nothing to teach people, nothing to give to people. How is he going to sit there and say Abdul Razzaq said to us this, of this, on that, and then narrate so many things and teach so many things, and there will be so many gatherings and circles of studies held, and slowly he will become a so-called imam, and eventually the imam of a sect. All of that requires material. All of that requires some authority with hadith or narration. And the reason he existed was Abdul Razzaq. So he ignored all of that. Ignored all the things he should have criticized. And all those massive amounts of narrations that he narrated Abdul Razzaq, he would have no access to anymore if he was honest with his own standards and stayed to them. He's not going to disadvantage himself by aspersing his master. But Abdullah ibn Musa isn't going to harm him because he only narrated a few things. Abdul Razzaq is the reason why Ahmad ibn Hanbal exists in the first place. His study mate, in other words, Yahya ibn Ma'in, exposed him. Alhabib actually confirms that happens. He said 2 trustworthy narrators reported this of Yahya ibn Ma'in. So it cannot be said that this was fabricated. And Yahya ibn Ma'in never said that. 2 narrators, trustworthy narrators, said that Yahya ibn Ma'in criticized Ahmad ibn Hanbal and exposed him in the way that we have revealed. If you want a clearer picture, we'll discuss or show you even more sources. In Mir'at al-Zaman, for example, في تواريخ الأعيان by سبط بن جوزي volume 14 page 118. He says, Abu Zakaria, a servant of Ahmed ibn Abi Khaythama, I was in Masjid al-Rusafa, and Ibn Ma'in was present at the same time. A messenger by Ahmed ibn Hanbal came to him, or sent by Ahmed ibn Hanbal, came to him and said to him, your brother Ahmed sends his salutations and says, you narrate many things by Ubaydullah ibn Musa al-Absi, the master of al-Bukhari. But both of us heard him criticize Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan or speak negatively of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Ahmed sending a messenger here to his colleague Ibn Ma'in, saying, you narrate many things about this of Ubaydullah ibn Musa. Have you not heard how he criticized Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, how he spoke negatively of him? Doesn't that mean you should stop narrating of this individual? Of course, Yahya ibn Ma'in was no slouch and he knew how to respond. He said, of course, after the narration, after the message by Ahmed ibn Hanbal, he said then, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, I've left the narrations of Ubaydullah ibn Musa. You should do like me. Ibn Ma'in said, send my salutations back to, or my salam back to Abi Abdullah, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, and say to him, both of us heard Abd al-Razzaq speak negatively of Uthman. So stop taking narrations by him, because Uthman is better than Muawiyah. Is he not? So Sheikh comments here, we have buried the secret together. You coming to me and say that I shouldn't take narrations from Abdullah ibn Musa because he speaks ill of Muawiyah? Didn't Abd al-Razzaq speak ill of Uthman? You want me to stop narrating for Ubaydullah ibn Musa? You stop narrating for Abd al-Razzaq. Let's see if you can do it or not. Since this is your business and this is your product that you sell, then let's see if you can stop selling that product. My product is Ubaydullah ibn Musa. Your product is the narrations of Abd al-Razzaq. So don't wreck my business and I won't wreck yours. The narration continues. Ibn Ma'in said, by Allah, I heard narrations by Abd al-Razzaq, not with or alongside Ahmed ibn Hanbal, more or greater than what I've heard of Al-Absi. But Ahmed was worried that all the things he learned from Abd al-Razzaq and all the things he gained from Abd al-Razzaq will amount to nothing if he did what he should towards the narrations of Abd al-Razzaq. Another third source, Tarikh Dimashq by Ibn Asakir, volume 36, page 188. Ahmed ibn Zuhair ibn Harb said, I heard Yahya ibn Ma'in say, when it reached him that Ahmed ibn Hanbal speaks ill of Ubaydullah ibn Musa due to the so-called Shi'ism, and Yahya responded, say, by Allah that knows all that is concealed and all that is witnessed, I heard Abd al-Razzaq narrations about this concept or this matter of Shi'ism more than what I heard Ubaydullah ibn Musa say. But Ahmed ibn Hanbal simply here is afraid to that his journey to Abdul Razzaq will amount to nothing and be wasted. And then, continuing on, Abu Zakaria, the slave of Ibn Abi the servant of Ibn Abi Khaythama, said, when I was in Jama' and describing where it was, and then he said Abu Khaythama was praying there and bowing between Dhuhr and Asr. And then Abu Zakaria Yahya ibn Ma'in, Abu Zakaria was his nickname, prayed the Dhuhr prayer and then sat beside him. And then Ahmad ibn Hanbal's messenger came to Yahya ibn Ma'in, and then he shortened his prayer, seeing that, and then sat down to listen to what the messenger had to say. And he said, messenger said, your brother Abu Abdullah Ahmad ibn Hanbal sends his salam or his salutations, and said, you narrate many things of Ubaydullah ibn Absi, but we both heard him, and I have for that reason stopped narrating or did not take his narrations. But in here actually this narration is more descriptive and shows more of the emotion that happened there. Yahya ibn Ma'in raised his head and said to the messenger, say to Abi Abdullah, or send my peace or salutations to him, say to him, Yahya ibn Ma'in says, peace be upon you, and says, we both heard Abdul Razzaq speak ill of Uthman ibn Affan, so stop narrating of Abdul Razzaq, because Uthman is better than Muawiyah. Of course, in terms of priority here, you should not narrate of Abdul Razzaq, because Abdul Razzaq spoke ill of Uthman, let alone Muawiyah. Then another narration states Yahya ibn Ma'in that was said to him, Ahmad ibn Hanbal said that Ubaydullah ibn Musa, his narrations are rejected because of Shi'ism. So due to Shi'ism, we should question and reject his narrations. But then Yahya ibn Ma'in said, by Allah, there is no God except him. Abdul Razzaq did more than that, 100 times over. He used the term, says he exaggerated more. So meaning that Abdul Razzaq exaggerated his way of, or overstepped the limits of what was accepted by the of narrations that could be accepted, that condemn and criticize the companions far more than Ubaydullah. And he said 100 times over. He's transgressed 100 times over when it comes to condemnation or even cursing. I heard Abdul Razzaq say many times worse than what I heard Ubaydullah say about those individuals, or on those matters or concepts. Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi also narrates in Al-Kifaya, page 130. Also in Tarikh Baghdad, volume 40, page 427. Same narrations or about the same incident. Of course, there is no comparison when it comes to who is considered a Shia, or what they refer to or define as Shi'ism, when it comes to individuals who did not have an issue to speak ill of some of their holy figures. For example, Abdul Razzaq spoke ill of Uthman, not Muawiyah, who in the eyes of the opposers is a much more holy figure than Muawiyah. And we mentioned the sources, and we mentioned many narrations in the past that expose who Al-Razzaq is, or reveal who Al-Razzaq is. One shocking revelation that shows that how Abdul Razzaq insulted Umar ibn al-Khattab. He called him Anwak, which is a very disparaging insult in the Arabic language. And it is known that Abdul Razzaq, what he said, that's why Yahya ibn Ma'in said, I heard Abdul Razzaq say far worse things than what Ubaydullah ibn has said about those figures. So let's look at that narration again. Al-Uqayli said to us, who said, I heard Ali ibn Abdullah al-Mubarak al-San'ani say, Zayd ibn Mubarak was an individual who accompanied Abdul Razzaq often and for a long time and narrated many things and learned many things and recorded many of his narrations. But then a time came where he destroyed all the things that he wrote, recorded of Abdul Razzaq. And when it reached or was with Muhammad ibn Thawr, he was asked why he did. He said, I will tell you. He explained, I was with Abdul Razzaq, and he mentioned us about narration of Ma'mar and al-Zahri and Malik and so on and so forth, that you'll find in Al-Bukhari. That was details were omitted, but Muslim and other places was full. The narration that mentions the incident of the disagreement between, or the conflict between Ali, Al-Abbas and Umar, in which Umar direct some words towards Ali and Abbas, in which he said to them, you saw Abu Bakr as a disbeliever and a traitor and immoral, and in other narrations that uses different terms. But in anyway, this was mentioned in Al-Muslim and Bukhari, but as we said, it was omitted. But then this narrator, when he was narrating or hearing this narration by Abdul Razzaq, he said, when I heard him reach the point where he said, Umar said to Ali and Abbas, you came to me requesting the inheritance of your brother or the son of your brother, and this person comes to me to request the inheritance of his wife. And then Abdul Razzaq said, look at this Anwak, insulting him. So he said, look at this, and use the term Anwak, meaning this idiot who didn't say you came to request the inheritance of the Prophet of Allah, and this man came requesting the inheritance of his daughter. But this narrator, when he heard these words from Abdul Razzaq, or these words from Abdul Razzaq, he decided to never narrate of him anything again, and that's why he ripped up all his records. That's why Yahya ibn Ma'in says, I heard things far worse from Abdul Razzaq than compared to Ubaydullah ibn Musa. If Ubaydullah ibn Musa, for example, insulted or disparaged Muawiyah, Abdul Razzaq disparaged Uthman, even insulting Umar, and as we've shown, called him an idiot. And when it comes about narrations, when Ahmad ibn Hanbal considered rejected about this area or this field of so-called rejected narrations, Abdul Razzaq narrated far more than Ubaydullah ibn Musa. So why did Ahmad ibn Hanbal disparage Ubaydullah ibn Musa in such a manner, but he stayed his tongue entirely about Abdul Razzaq when he deserved to be criticized far more, because he committed the same acts and even worse, much more, as Yahya ibn Ma'in has said. So the reason can only be seen as Ahmad ibn Hanbal seeing his teachings or what he learned from Abdul Razzaq as a product to trade with, and it's his market basically. If you were sincere and an honest, truthful worshipper, and that you do not put your benefits ahead of the benefits of others or the interests of your faith, then you wouldn't have, or you would have at least exposed Abdul Razzaq also. Those thousands of narrations that you learned of Abdul Razzaq and revealed, and still did not make any condemnation. To them, that was very important. They were fruits, those narrations. They gathered them like they would gather gold and silver, because a narrator would not exist, the scholar of their time would not exist without those narrations, especially if those narrations were the strongest. People would gather around these people and would learn so much from them, and as far as the eye can see, people would continue to gather around them. If Ahmed ibn Hanbal becomes honest with himself and his own claimed standards and rejects Abdul Razzaq for his narrations, then he would have nothing to sell, and then they would go to others, and he doesn't want that to happen. He wants his shop to remain open. They want to succeed. That proves, brothers, especially our so-called Sunni brothers, that your scholars, when they declare narrators reliable or unreliable, for example, Ahmed ibn Hanbal said, this narrator is weak, this narrator's narrations are not to be accepted, his narrations are poor quality, and they use whatever other terms they use in the science of Jarh and Ta'dil. Be careful to not let them think on your behalf. Think of the concealed reasons, the reasons that were concealed from you, and read between the lines. And then you would find the true reasons, that it all comes down to their own personal benefit, their own status. Not that they were pure academic standards that they followed, or declarations and conclusions that they made were based on them. It's all about personal benefit or sectarian bias. Otherwise, justify, and how would you justify why Ahmed ibn Hanbal turned a blind eye to Abdul Razzaq's transgressions, but Ubaidullah ibn Musa he criticized. What Abdullah ibn Razzaq, in their eyes, in their standards, the opposer standards, Abdul Razzaq did far worse than Ubaidullah ibn Musa. That's the first point you wanted to make. The second point, the very embarrassing point to our opposers, and I want them to answer this question if they call. Now we have read Ibn Ma'in's accusation of Ibn Hanbal, that he did not talk about Abdul Razzaq or criticize him because he was worried that everything that he learned from Abdul Razzaq will be worth nothing. All those years and all those journeys he made to Abdul Razzaq would mean nothing anymore, and he would have nothing to give. One of them, we have one or the other option. Either Yahya ibn Ma'in is truthful in what he said and what he accused Ahmed ibn Hanbal, and if Yahya ibn Ma'in was honest in what he said, that Ahmed ibn Hanbal cannot be relied upon. He doesn't have one standard. He doesn't have a standard of anyone who insults the companions of the Prophet, and that there are narrations that show themselves to be a Shia, then he would reject them entirely. Or was he the kind of person that would try to outweigh his benefits and disadvantages if he accepted the same standards. That means in that case he's not reliable. That we cannot trust what he tells you or what he tells us about Jarh and Ta'dil or the science of narration. Everything Ahmad ibn Hanbal says, they cannot be accepted anymore. But then you come to me and say, no, that narration, Ahmad said it's weak, and he said one of its narrators is poor and aspersed him. I would say this is rejected because Ahmad ibn Hanbal has been proven in your faith that he cannot be relied upon in that science, because Yahya ibn Ma'in, that is also considered an expert of Jarh and Ta'dil, has said about him that he is the type of man that doesn't have the same standard. Yahya ibn Ma'in can remain, Ahmad ibn Hanbal will fall. There is another option. Ahmad ibn Hanbal remains trustworthy, but then you must reject Yahya ibn Ma'in and consider him a liar and a type of person who falsely slanders or defames Ahmad ibn Hanbal. It wasn't the case that Ahmad ibn Hanbal did not say anything negative about Abd al-Razzaq. He was afraid of what would far more sincere to ever do something like that. And Ibn Ma'in did that because he wanted to defame Hanbal. In that case, then Ahmad ibn Hanbal, as we said, fabricating things about Ahmad ibn Hanbal and saying things that are not true to disparage Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So in other words, Ahmad ibn Hanbal is a liar, looks out for his own benefits, or the other option is Yahya ibn Ma'in is a liar and falsely accused and purposefully accused Ahmad ibn Hanbal of doing things he had not done. So that's your two options. Some might say that Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he didn't know what Abd al-Razzaq insulted and criticized what they consider to be the companions. Is this accepted? No. Why? Because Yahya ibn Ma'in, when he answered Ahmad's messenger, he said to him, he reminded him that both of them, Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in, heard Abd al-Razzaq speak ill of Uthman. So we come back to the same point. Either Yahya ibn Ma'in is truthful with his accusation, which means Ahmad ibn Hanbal is no longer reliable, or the opposite. Ahmad didn't truly hear anything negative like this of Abd al-Razzaq. Then Yahya ibn Ma'in would no longer be reliable, especially since Ahmad ibn Hanbal, it was narrated, they narrated in their sources, Ahmad ibn Hanbal never heard Abd al-Razzaq curse any of the so-called figures of their faith. For example, Ahmad al-Ajli here says Abd al-Razzaq was trustworthy and had some Shi'ism, and he did not see that Uthman was better than Ali. That's what they think is considered Shi'ism. The scholars who did not see Uthman better than Ali, not that they disown or dissociate of Uthman, according to this narration. And then they mention Muawiyah in his presence one day, Abd al-Razzaq. He said, do not dirty our gathering with the mention of his name. That's how he described it. Then Abdullah Ahmad ibn Hanbal said, I asked my father about this. Did you hear Abd al-Razzaq say something like this? Say negative things about Muawiyah? He said, Me personally, I did not hear that. And I never heard anything similar to that. I never heard him insult Muawiyah or anything similar to that. Say Uthman, Abu Bakr, Umar. These are the claims of Ahmed. Yahya ibn Ma'in claimed what? Remind Ahmed, both of us heard Abdul Razzaq insult Uthman. So one or the other is truthful. Like one of them is lying, one of them is honest. You choose either. Yahya ibn Ma'in is being truthful here, Ahmed ibn Hanbal. And if Yahya ibn Ma'in is truthful, then you cannot depend on Ahmed ibn Hanbal's declarations of trustworthiness of narrators, because he's not reliable. Or you could say Ahmed ibn Hanbal is actually truthful in his claim. Then Yahya ibn Ma'in's narrations or his evaluations of narrations, whether they are weak or strong, they can also not be accepted. So there is no good option here. If you want to be safe with your faith, then take both of them and throw them in the closest rubbish bin. Because after all this, it's difficult to depend on their declarations of weakness and strength, reliability of narrators. You cannot do so safely. And that leads you to understand that the narrations that they declared to be weak and rejected, or rejected some of its narrators, these narrations in truth were actually not weak narrations, they were strong narrations. The reason they weakened them by weakening the narrations and aspersing the narrations of those hadith. They were not based on academic standards that were devoid of bias, sectarianism, and personal benefit. The matter to the opposers is this. What is important to our opposers is this, that the narrations that they do not agree with, they reject and weaken. If you look at the reasons why these narrations were rejected, you would find there is a narrator. Ubayd ibn Musa, for example. Why was he rejected? Was he committed a sin? Commit fornication? Alcoholic? Fabricate narrations more than once? Was he caught in the act? None of those things. So what was the issue? They say munkar al-hadith, as in what? What does that mean? That means this narration that he reviewed or revealed, that makes him weak. That narration is munkar, or not accepted. But we don't understand why this narration was rejected. It's the chain of transmission, the men of chain of transmission are authentic. You tell us the reason this narration is weak, you tell us it's because they narrated this narration. But that makes you run in circles. That's running around in circles now, logically speaking. And that's makes that argument invalid. Because your standard is either safeguard your personal benefit or our sect's benefit or interest. Those who are declared as weak, many occasions that show they are actually not weak narrators. The only reason they were seen as such is because they narrated things they did not want to hear. So that's how you know those narrations are authentic. When those so-called scholars expose each other, when Yahya ibn Ma'in and Ahmed ibn Hanbal exposed each other, that revealed something to us and dispersed this illusion that they are trustworthy. And then we know for a fact that this narration that the Messenger of Allah, prayers upon him and his household, and the narration by Anas, when he said, this man and myself are authorities of Allah upon his creation in the day of resurrection. because the only problem with this narration is what they aspersed some of its narrators for, because they narrated this narration. Not because the narrators did something that requires them to be considered unreliable. Simply because they narrated this narration that they cannot find agreeable. So this is the conclusion of this research paper, this practice paper. That's how I want you to be free-minded and evaluate things for your own. Do not let them think on your behalf, those so-called preachers. When the Shia individuals say, you narrated by Anas from your own chains of transmissions, and he said, I was with the Messenger of Allah, praise upon him and household. He saw Ali coming towards him, and he said, this man and myself are authorities of Allah upon his creation, the day of resurrection. What does the opposer do when they hear this narration? They would call their scholars like Ar'ur and others. He would say, this narration is munkar, rejected. Why? Or they say it's inserted. You say, why is it do you think it's inserted? Because it has Ubaidullah ibn Musa, for example. What's the issue with Ubaidullah ibn Musa? He said Ahmad ibn Hanbal said he's rejected. He said he has rejected narrations. And also ibn Matar said rejected. Ahmad ibn Hanbal said those things about them, aspersed them. We say, okay, then why did Ahmad ibn Hanbal say he is munkar? Look at what lies behind those statements. And you will find there is nothing wrong with this narrator except that narration or narration similar to it. Narrating things that they don't like, despite being trustworthy, narrations that Bukhari himself took from. This narrator has narrations that Bukhari has included in his most reliable sources to the opposers. But despite that, they will still reject him for a narration he made, simply for the narration he made. So do not let them think on your behalf. And then you will discover, once you free your mind and investigate freely, you would know how much these preachers and scholars fought against Prophet and his household, peace be upon them. How sensitive they are towards these narrations. They cannot lay comfortably just accepting that these narrations are authentic, despite the fact that there is nothing wrong with them, except that it doesn't agree with their own biases. And their corrupt selves. Presenter speaking here, and brothers, I remind you that you may call, you may participate, or answer the questions of this research topic for today, for whatever time you still have left. I remind the questions of tonight's session directed towards our opposers. First question: do you accept Ahmad ibn Hanbal's declarations of the authenticities of hadith? Do you think Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who is the Imam of the Hanbali sect, that he is authentic? Those so-called Wahhabis who follow him, who call him the Imam of Sunnah or Ahl Sunnah. We want you to call and answer. Do you think Ahmad ibn Hanbal is just? If you say he is, we say then that's the next question. If Ahmad ibn Hanbal is trustworthy or just as a scholar, when Yahya ibn Ma'in accused him with that or made that dangerous claim about him, which shows that Ahmad ibn Hanbal had double standards and did not want to expose Abd al-Razzaq, because if he did, then he would have nothing to narrate to people, and they would have nothing to learn from him, and he would cease to exist, and all his efforts would mean nothing. That means Ahmad ibn Hanbal didn't have moral standards or academic standards that he adhered to. He followed where his business lied. And if that's the case, then Yahya ibn Ma'in, if you say that Yahya ibn Ma'in, no, was not right, he was not true in what he said, that means Yahya ibn Ma'in was making false accusations. If you did say yes, he was accusing Ahmad ibn Hanbal as false things, then Yahya ibn Ma'in himself is not to be relied upon. The fourth question, why did Ahmad ibn Hanbal ignore the fact that Abdul Razzaq insulted Uthman and still narrated things from him, many things? But Ubayd ibn Allah ibn Musa, on the other hand, he said he does not take his narrations because he insulted Muawiyah. Is it true then what Yahya ibn Ma'in said? The only reason was because Ahmad ibn Hanbal worried about this person, Abdul Razzaq, because he'll have nothing then to give to people and his market will cease to exist. Isn't this deceit? And isn't this a clear sign of his unreliability? We want answers from opposers, scholars mainly, if they're listening. Ahmad ibn Hanbal was exposed during this session, and we wish to allow those who want to defend Ahmad ibn Hanbal to try to justify his actions, because this session we have established that this man does not have academic standards and he has no fear of Allah when it comes to his evaluations and opinions. And you always argue with the Shia, and when we mention some narration, this Ahmad ibn Hanbal said this is weak, this narration is rejected, this narrator is not accepted. We have shown during this narration, this session, that Ahmad ibn Hanbal's declarations are weak themselves and they cannot be relied upon. This game of narrations or game of trains of transmissions, Ahmad ibn Hanbal said it's not a narration we accept, then we don't accept it. Or Ahmad and others. By the way, that's the practice of all of their scholars. They practice this weakening of narrators or narrations if they don't agree with their own biases and inclinations. Whether they're narrations that disparage companions or narrations that reveal the exceptional and traits and deeds of Ahlul Bayt, peace be upon them. Anyway, while we wait for calls, I want to ask Sheikh Al-Habib, perhaps the opposers would say, if Ahmad ibn Hanbal said someone is weak because of his narrations, for example, maybe he looked at the totality of this narrator's narrations and reached the conclusion that this narrator is not trustworthy because of the totality of what he narrated. Isn't this the practice of the science of narration? You might read all of what was narrated by the narrator, and if you see in totality cannot be relied upon, you reject him. Sheikh responds, if this narrator many things were narrated of him, but then he had some narrations that we reject, we say then he is not trustworthy, then that's not something we do. To look at the totality of what someone narrates, that's actually a sound academic approach. But that's not what Ahmad ibn Hanbal was doing. Yahya ibn Ma'in exposed him that if the standard for Ahmad ibn Hanbal was that he looked at the totality of Ubaydullah ibn Musa's narrations and then found them, the majority of them, to be unaccepted, then that would be correct. But that's not the case, because Al-Bukhari narrated tens of narrations of Ubaydullah ibn Musa, and Ubaydullah ibn Musa was not seen as rejected by Bukhari. What about Abdul Razzaq's narrations? Yahya ibn Ma'in himself had said, swearing by Allah, I've heard narrations like the ones Ubaydullah ibn Musa has narrated. He said 100 times worse than that, 100 times more. So why did, from that totality, Ahmad ibn Hanbal did not think that his Sheikh Abdul Razzaq must be rejected also, despite Yahya ibn Ma'in saying he narrated many things in that regarding that concept. We have a call for Muhammad from Morocco. Brother Muhammad, I first want to send my salutations to all of you, especially Sheikh Yasser Al-Habib, and also congratulate you on the coming occasion of the most joyous month of Ramadan, and also ask Allah to give you support. According to the research Sheikh has presented today, I am with logic. I am with intellect. Yes, everything Sheikh is saying is correct. However, this is a problem with all the Imams. For example, I'm a Maliki, or whatever you want to say, but the problem is this Maliki sect. If you look at some of the myths in it, and for example, famous incident when that man came to him to ask him a question, what Ar-Rahman al-Arsh istawa means, that incident, that even that embarrassing answer he gave, things that if you look at all the Imams in our sect have that problem, past and present. There are verses in the Quran, for example, Musa, peace be upon him, and Ibrahim, peace be upon them, and upon our Prophet and all other messengers, prophets, peace of Allah. They say he wanted to see Allah, saying that I want to see you, otherwise I won't believe. I don't want to go in depth in detail what Malik had said, or Imam Malik had said, but the apologies is the poor quality call, so not much is heard. Brothers, just I want to ask you, do you think Ahmad ibn Hanbal is reliable? No, I do not. Well done, brother. May Allah reward you. So, since you don't trust not just Ahmad ibn Hanbal, all those who narrate what they claim to be narrators of the Sunnah, why do you, brother, then still follow them? They are giving you a false version of Islam. Why do you not become a Shia then? Brother, I say to you, I do not follow their madhab or their sects. I'm like that slave who, with Fir'aun hiding his faith, the environment we are in, there are many problems that we faced, many dangers, and I have children. So I do not bring danger to myself and my family. I protect myself with that. May Allah save you, brother. And may Allah protect you. May Allah guide you, and may Allah support you in your effort. But Sheikh, it seems like this brother is a believer, but he conceals his faith. Brother, some of the things you mentioned, and we have spoke about previous sessions, that these people, these preachers of the opposers, they don't have a problem with accusing of each other of lying, nor accusing their narrators of lying, if it doesn't agree with their own inclinations. And Nawawi, for example, said, he's talking about what Commander of the Faithful, peace be upon him, had said, An al-Abbas, and how, as they narrate, that they went to Umar requesting their inheritance. Mazari, I believe, said this when said Abbas said to Umar, judge between me and this liar. He said, that doesn't isn't in agreement or in line with what Al-Abbas would actually say, or about the traits of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And then he says, however, we are instructed to think well of the companions. May Allah be pleased with all of them, and to exonerate them of all falsehoods and uh, of all insulting things or disparaging things about them. Then he goes on, he says, even if it reaches a level that we must then call the narrators that narrated these narrations as liars, then we will do so. So they don't have a problem as long as they protect the companions. Unfortunately, we are at the end of the session. We are out of time, and we wanted more time to be able to receive more calls from others so they can try to participate and discuss what was established in the session. However, with the end of today's session, we ask Allah's prayers and blessings upon Muhammad and his pure household, and his damnations upon their enemies.
زيد بن المبارك. أي طبعا مع الأسف. أي مع الأسف. نعم. وكم ترى من الأعاجيب في هذه الملة. هي بس لازم واحد يطلعها للناس.